Welcome back to Ari Coins News. What if a quarter you almost ignored could be connected to a $1,000, $2,000, or even higher auction story? Today, we're uncovering 4 fascinating Washington quarters: the 1980D, 1983P, 1988P, and 1991P, and the extraordinary prices achieved by their finest known examples. These coins may look ordinary, but the right mint mark, preservation, and grade can create a dramatic difference in value. Forget the face value for a moment. Let's discover which of these 4 Washington quarters has the biggest documented auction history in the 2026 market. Let's get started with first coin. If you have a 1980 Washington quarter with a small D mint mark, don't spend it too quickly. At first glance, this coin may look completely ordinary, especially if it has scratches, marks, or signs of circulation. But the 1980D Washington quarter has an interesting story in the modern coin market because there can be a dramatic difference between an ordinary circulated example and an exceptionally preserved mint state coin. In today's 2026 market, collectors are paying attention not simply to the date and mint mark, but to condition, surface quality, strike, eye appeal, certification, and especially the very highest grades. So before deciding that your old quarter is worth only 25 cents, take a closer look at the details. The coin's date should read 1980, and the D mint mark identifies the Denver Mint. This issue was produced in very large numbers, more than 518 million pieces, so the date and D mint mark alone do not make it rare. The real story begins when we examine condition. A heavily circulated coin with scratches and wear is usually a very different market proposition from a professionally graded coin that has survived with exceptional surfaces. And that is where this seemingly ordinary quarter can become much more interesting. Now let's talk about the coin itself. The 1980D Washington quarter belongs to the modern clad era of the series. Washington quarters produced for circulation after the silver era were made from copper and nickel clad over a copper core, meaning you should not assume that an older-looking 1980 quarter contains silver simply because it is a Washington quarter. This distinction is important because many online videos make the mistake of calling every older Washington quarter a silver coin. The 1980D is not one of those classic 90% silver quarters from before 1965. Instead, its value is primarily connected to collector demand, condition, certification, and unusual quality. If your example is scratched and circulated, those marks generally reduce its collector appeal rather than increase it. A scratch is not automatically a rare mint error, and a damaged coin should not be described as valuable simply because it looks unusual. Collectors separate ordinary damage from genuine mint-made varieties or errors. That means the first job is careful observation. Check the date, confirm the D-mint mark, look at Washington's portrait, inspect the reverse design, and examine the fields and lettering under good lighting. Avoid cleaning the coin, because polishing or harsh cleaning can permanently damage the surfaces and make the coin less desirable to collectors. Here is where the 2026 market becomes especially interesting. Current sales data show that ordinary examples can remain close to face value, while certified high-grade examples can bring significantly more. Recent online sales reported for 1980D quarters include circulated examples around the $1 range and uncirculated examples around a few dollars. PCGS MS64 example was reported sold for $9.99 in February 2026, while another PCGS MS65 example sold for $25 in April 2026. An NGC MS66 example was reported at $17.99 in January 2026. These numbers demonstrate an important lesson. There is no single 1980D quarter value. The grade changes the conversation. A coin that has spent decades circulating through pockets, cash registers, and coin machines can have scratches and contact marks that keep it in a lower condition category. Meanwhile, a coin that avoided circulation and preserved its original surfaces can potentially enter the mint state market. Even then, certification and buyer demand matter. A raw coin that appears brilliant to the naked eye is not automatically MS65, MS66, or MS67. Professional grading is a specialized process, and the difference between grades can be extremely important. But now we reach the part that gets collectors excited, the top of the grading scale. Auction records show that extraordinary 1980D Washington quarters can sell for dramatically more than ordinary examples. Great Collections reports that it has sold 1980D Washington quarters across many grades, with reported prices ranging from low-dollar examples to several $1,000s at the very top. One particularly notable result is a PCGS MS67 plus 1980D Washington quarter reported sold for $2,315.50. The same auction archive reports a historical high reaching $2,869. This is the kind of result that can create headlines, but it must be understood correctly. A multi-$1,000 auction result does not mean every 1980D quarter is worth thousands of dollars. Quite the opposite. The exceptional result demonstrates how powerful condition rarity can become at the highest certified grades. When millions of coins were originally produced, the challenge is not finding the date. It is finding an example that survived with extraordinary preservation and then received an exceptionally high grade. That is why a collector should never look only at the year and mint mark when estimating value. The grade and quality of the individual coin are essential. Now imagine two 1980D quarters sitting next to each other. The first has been in circulation for decades. Its highest points show wear, the fields have numerous contact marks, and there may be visible scratches across the surfaces. Its appearance tells the story of a coin that was used as money. The second coin has sharp details, strong original luster, minimal contact marks, and surfaces that are unusually clean for its age. Both coins have the same date. Both have the same D mint mark. Both were made at the Denver Mint, yet the market can treat them very differently. This is one of the most important lessons in numismatics. Rarity is not always about how few coins were originally minted. Sometimes it is about how few coins remain in a particular level of preservation. A common date can become conditionally scarce at the highest grades. That is exactly why collectors pay attention to certified populations and auction records. The market is not simply asking, how old is this coin? It is asking, how difficult is it to find this particular quality of this particular coin? There is another important point about scratches. If your 1980D quarter has obvious scratches, do not immediately assume that those scratches are a special error or variety. Most scratches on circulated coins are simply post-mint damage caused after the coin left the mint. Collectors generally distinguish these marks from genuine mint-made errors. A scratch across Washington's portrait, lettering, or the reverse may look dramatic in a close-up video, but appearance alone does not prove a mint error. This is why responsible coin collecting avoids promising a huge value based on one unusual-looking mark. If you want to understand the potential value, compare the coin with reliable grading standards and documented sales of the same date and mint. The condition of the entire coin matters. Luster, strike, contact marks, wear, discoloration, cleaning, and overall eye appeal all contribute to how collectors view it. A damaged circulated coin should not be presented as a $2,000 coin simply because a different 1980D quarter achieved a four-figure auction result. The documented high sale belongs to a specific high-grade example, not to every coin sharing the same date and mint mark. So what should collectors remember when they find a 1980D quarter today? First, verify the date. Second, verify the D mint mark. Third, remember that this is a clad quarter rather than a silver quarter. Fourth, examine the condition without cleaning or altering the coin. Fifth, understand that ordinary circulated examples are generally not rare simply because they are from 1980. And finally, if the coin appears exceptionally well preserved, that is when the story becomes more interesting. The current market evidence shows a clear range. Ordinary examples can sell for around face value or modest premiums, while certified high-grade examples can reach substantially higher prices. Recent 2026 sales provide real examples, including roughly $10 for an MS64, $25 for an MS65, and $17.99 for an MS66. while an exceptional PCGS MS67 Plus example reached $2,315.50 in a Great Collections auction. These figures should be treated as documented market examples rather than guaranteed prices, because auction results can vary according to grade, certification, eye appeal, timing, and buyer competition. And that brings us to the biggest lesson of this 1980D Washington quarter. The coin's story is not simply old quarter equals rare quarter. It is much more fascinating than that. A coin can be common in total production, but difficult to find in exceptional condition. A circulated coin with scratches may have little collector premium, while an unusually preserved certified specimen can attract serious bidding. The difference can come down to tiny details that are easy to overlook. That is why every coin deserves a careful look before you dismiss it, and also why every unusual-looking coin should be evaluated realistically rather than automatically labeled rare. If you have a 1980D Washington quarter, check the date, inspect the mint mark, look closely at the surfaces, and compare its actual condition with documented sales. In 2026, the strongest evidence tells us that the truly dramatic values belong to exceptional high-grade examples, not ordinary scratched pieces. So the next time a 1980D quarter appears in your change jar, don't assume it is either a fortune or worthless. Turn it over, examine it carefully, and remember, in numismatics, the individual coin tells the story. Second coin. What if an ordinary-looking 1991 Washington quarter sitting in a collection, coin jar, or old change box could be worth much more than 25 cents? Today we are taking a close look at the 1991 Washington quarter, the classic Washington portrait on the front, the eagle design on the reverse, and especially that small letter P showing that the coin was struck at the Philadelphia Mint. This is a fascinating coin because the 1991 quarter is not rare simply because it is old. In fact, the United States Mint produced approximately 570,968,000 examples, so millions were made. But here is where the story changes. Collectors can pay significantly more for coins that survived in exceptional condition. In 2026, documented sales show a wide range, from ordinary circulated pieces selling for roughly $1 or $2 to professionally graded coins bringing tens or even hundreds of dollars. The highest prices are reserved for extraordinary examples in very high mint state grades. So if you have a 1991 quarter with scratches, wear, or other marks, don't assume you have discovered a fortune. Instead, let's examine what actually makes one example different from another, how the market values these coins, and why condition can be far more important than the date alone. The first thing to understand is the identity of this coin. The 1991 Washington quarter was struck at Philadelphia, and the P mint mark is located on the obverse near Washington's neck. Unlike the classic silver Washington quarters from the earlier era, the 1991 is a copper-nickel-clad quarter with a copper center. PCGS lists the composition as 75% copper and 25% nickel over pure copper center, with a standard weight of 5.67 grams and a diameter of 24.3 millimeters. That means the coin's value is not primarily based on silver content. Instead, collectors look at condition, surfaces, strike quality, varieties, errors, certification, and market demand. If your quarter has been circulating for decades, it may show scratches, contact marks, discoloration, or wear. Those characteristics generally make it less desirable than a pristine mint state example. And this is one of the biggest mistakes people make when watching coin value videos. They see one high auction price and assume every coin with the same date and mint mark must be worth that amount. That's not how the numismatic market works. A sale belongs to a specific coin in a specific grade and condition. Now let's talk about the ordinary 1991 quarter that you might actually find. Current 2026 sales data show several examples selling for modest amounts. Recent listings recorded sales around $1.04, $1.55, $1.63, $1.69, $1.70, and around $2 for ordinary or circulated examples. Brilliant uncirculated pieces have also sold for a few dollars. These results are important because they give us a realistic starting point. If you pull a 1991p quarter from circulation and it has obvious scratches and signs of use, it usually should not be described as a high-dollar rarity. Its market value may remain close to face value or only modestly above it. The scratches themselves don't automatically make the coin rare. In most cases, scratches acquired after the coin left the mint are considered damage rather than a valuable mint error. So if your quarter has a long scratch across Washington's portrait or across the eagle, that doesn't automatically mean an auction house will consider it special. The better question is whether the unusual feature was created during the minting process or occurred later. That distinction can completely change how collectors evaluate the coin. But now imagine a second 1991p quarter. This one has never been heavily circulated. Its original luster is still visible. Washington's hair and facial details remain sharply defined. The reverse eagle has strong detail, and the fields have very few distracting marks. Suddenly, the conversation becomes much more interesting. Professional grading services can place exceptionally preserved coins into mint state grades, and the difference between an MS-94, MS-85, MS-36, and MS-87 can be enormous in the marketplace. Price data from 2026 provide a good example. A PCGS MS-64 1991p quarter was reported sold for $14.99 on June 21, 2026. PCGS MS-66 examples were reported at $61 on February 2 and $84 on April 30, 2026. Those numbers show why condition matters. A coin with the same date, same mint mark, same design, and same original denomination can move from a modest premium into a much stronger collector market simply because it is preserved at a higher certified grade. The difference isn't magic. It reflects scarcity, competition, and the difficulty of finding coins with sufficiently clean and attractive surfaces. The really fascinating level begins at MS-87. PCGS identifies the 1991p as a common issue overall, but specifically notes that MS-66 and higher examples become difficult to locate, while MS-87 coins are particularly scarce. PCGS's auction database lists an auction record of $492 for a PCGS MS-67 example, sold on June 30, 2013. Another documented MS-67 example, graded by NGC, sold for $184 in 2018, while another NGC MS-87 example sold for $89.05. These different results teach us another important lesson. Even when two coins have the same numerical grade, the market price can vary. Certification service, appeal, timing, buyer interest, auction venue, and the individual coin's appearance can all influence the final result. A high-grade label is important, but it does not create a guaranteed price. Auction records are historical evidence, not promises about what a coin will sell for today. And there is even newer evidence from 2026. Graysheet reports a 1991p Washington quarter graded NGC MS-87 Plus that sold for $147 at Heritage Auctions on March 17, 2026. The same market data show a population of 63 examples at MS-67, with 4 listed at MS-87 Plus and 2 at MS-97 Star, according to the census information displayed on that page. This is exactly the kind of information serious collectors watch. A coin with a huge original mintage can still become difficult to locate at the highest grades. The key phrase here is condition rarity. There may be hundreds of millions of coins originally produced, but the number surviving with nearly flawless surfaces, strong strikes, attractive luster, and the characteristics required for the very highest grades can be dramatically smaller. That is why the top of the market looks completely different from the bottom. Your circulated 1991p quarter and a professionally certified MS-87 Plus quarter are technically the same issue, but from a collector's perspective, they can represent completely different levels of scarcity. Now let's return to the scratched coin, because that is what many people will want to know about. If your 1991p quarter has visible scratches, don't clean it, polish it, or try to make the surface look shiny. Cleaning can permanently alter the original surface and may reduce collector appeal. Instead, examine the coin carefully under good lighting. Look at the date, verify the P mint mark, inspect Washington's portrait, and then study the reverse. Pay attention to whether the marks appear to be normal contact damage or something that might have originated during striking. Remember that ordinary scratches are usually not valuable errors. A genuine mint error is a separate category and requires careful examination. Also look for signs of circulation. If the highest points of the design show wear, the coin is unlikely to compete with pristine mint state examples. On the other hand, if your coin looks remarkably fresh and has very few contact marks, it may be worth comparing with certified examples and professional grading standards. The important thing is not to let a dramatic scratch convince you that the coin is automatically rare. In numismatics, the complete story of the coin matters more than one unusual-looking mark. Another reason the 1991 P is interesting is that different coins from the same year can have completely different stories. One quarter may have spent years in circulation, passing through countless transactions and accumulating marks. Another may have been placed into a collection shortly after leaving the mint and remained protected for decades. A third may have been stored improperly and developed unattractive surfaces. A fourth might have survived with exceptional luster and unusually clean fields. All four coins can carry the exact same 1991 date and P mint mark, yet collectors may value them very differently. This is why experienced collectors don't simply ask, "What is a 1991 P quarter worth?" They ask, "What is this particular 1991 P quarter worth in this particular condition?" That change in wording is extremely important. The market value is attached to the individual coin, not simply to the date printed on it. There is also a major difference between asking price and sold price. Someone can list an ordinary 1991 P quarter online for $20, $50, or even $500, but that doesn't mean collectors are actually paying that amount. A completed sale is much stronger evidence because it shows what a buyer actually paid. For this coin, the documented market evidence gives us a useful picture. Ordinary 2026 examples have sold for around $1 to a few dollars, while certified MS-64 and MS-66 examples have brought substantially more. At the very high end, certified MS-87 examples have reached prices in the hundreds, with PCGS reporting a $472 auction record. The 2026 MS-87 plus NGC sale at $146 provides another modern reference point. These numbers should not be turned into a single guaranteed value. Instead, they show the enormous range that can exist between an ordinary circulated quarter and an exceptional certified specimen. So what should you do if you discover a 1991 P Washington quarter today? Start with identification, not excitement. Confirm that the date really is 1991 and that the mint mark is P, then inspect the overall condition. Is the coin heavily worn? Are there scratches? Is there discoloration? Does it still have original-looking luster? Are the design details sharp? If it appears ordinary and circulated, its value is likely modest. If it appears exceptionally well preserved, compare it with documented certified examples. And if you believe you have an unusually high-grade coin, professional authentication and grading may be worth considering because the highest values in this series are associated with certified condition. Most importantly, don't clean the coin before evaluation. The original surface is part of the evidence collectors use when judging quality. The biggest takeaway from the 1991 P Washington quarter is simple. The coin is common by mintage, but exceptional condition can be uncommon. With a reported mintage of 570,968,000, the date and P mint mark alone do not make the quarter a major rarity. But PCGS specifically points out that MS-66 and higher examples become difficult to find, and MS-87 examples are particularly scarce. That is the real story behind the big numbers. It isn't that every 1991 P quarter is secretly worth hundreds of dollars. It is that a tiny fraction of an enormous production run can become highly desirable when preserved at an exceptional grade. The documented 2026 sales make that difference clear. Ordinary pieces can sell for roughly $1 or a few dollars. MS-34 examples can reach the teens. MS-86 examples can reach dozens of dollars. And exceptional MS-57 or MS-77 plus coins have demonstrated three-figure auction results. So before you throw a 1991p Washington quarter into a spending pile, take a second look. If it is scratched and circulated, keep your expectations realistic. The scratches generally don't create value, but if you discover an unusually clean, sharply struck, lustrous example, that is where the story gets much more interesting. The 1991p quarter reminds us why coin collecting is so fascinating. Two coins that look almost identical can have completely different market histories. One might be worth little more than face value, while another, preserved for decades and certified at an elite grade, can attract serious collector competition. In 2026, the strongest evidence shows that the big value is not in the date alone. It is in exceptional condition and documented market demand. So examine your quarter carefully, don't clean it, don't rely on an inflated online asking price, and remember the golden rule of numismatics. The real value belongs to the individual coin and its proven condition, not simply the year printed on it. Coin number 3. Today we're taking a detailed look at the 1988p Washington quarter, a coin that can look completely ordinary in circulated condition, but becomes much more interesting when we move into the highest mint state grades. This is not a story where every 1988p quarter is worth hundreds or thousands of dollars. In fact, the Philadelphia Mint produced 562,052,000 examples, making the date common overall. But the coin market doesn't value every example equally. A quarter with heavy circulation, scratches, and obvious wear can remain close to face value, while an exceptionally preserved example with strong luster, clean surfaces, and an elite certified grade can attract serious collector competition. Current 2026 sales give us a fascinating range. Ordinary examples have sold for roughly $1 to several dollars. Certified MS-66 pieces have brought roughly $45 to more than $70 in documented sales, and exceptional MS-67 examples have reached hundreds or even thousands of dollars in individual auction results. So if you have a 1988p quarter, don't just ask whether the year is rare. Ask a much better question. What condition is your individual coin actually in? Let's begin with identification. The 1988p Washington quarter was struck at the Philadelphia Mint, and the P Mint mark appears on the obverse near Washington's neck. PCGS identifies the coin as a regular strike Washington quarter with a diameter of 24.3 millimeters and a weight of 5.67 grams. It is made of 75% copper and 25% nickel over a pure copper center. This is important because the 1988p is not one of the old silver Washington quarters. The silver composition ended for regular circulation Washington quarters in 1964, with clad composition beginning in 1965. So the value of a 1988p is not coming from silver content. Instead, collectors look at preservation, grade, surface quality, strike, eye appeal, varieties, and documented demand. If your example is simply a good circulated coin, it may have some collector interest, but the really dramatic prices are associated with exceptional condition. That distinction should remain at the center of any honest 2026 value discussion. Now imagine the first 1988p quarter, a coin that has spent decades in circulation. Maybe it was in a cash register, a vending machine, a pocket, or a jar of loose change. The surfaces show contact marks. The highest points of Washington's portrait have some wear. The reverse eagle has lost some of its original sharpness. Perhaps there are scratches across the fields. This coin has a story, but those scratches usually do not make it rare. Most scratches that appear after the coin leaves the mint are simply post-mint damage. They should not automatically be described as valuable mint errors. In fact, if you're examining a coin for serious value, the safest approach is to leave the surface alone. Don't polish it, and don't try to remove scratches. Cleaning can damage the original surface and may make a potentially collectible coin less desirable. A circulated 1988p with obvious wear should be evaluated realistically rather than compared directly with a top-grade auction coin. Current 2026 sold listings include ordinary 1988p examples around $1.45 to $3.13, with some circulated examples selling for around $1.70 to $1.79. Those results are a much better guide to ordinary market reality than an eye-catching headline about a four-figure coin. Now let's look at a second 1988p quarter, because this is where the story changes. Imagine a coin that has spent most of its life protected from circulation. The surfaces still show attractive original luster. Washington's portrait is sharply defined. The reverse eagle is crisp, and there are very few distracting contact marks. Instead of thinking about the coin as an ordinary quarter, collectors may start asking whether it could qualify for a high mint state grade. This is where professional grading becomes important. An MS grade describes a coin that shows no wear from circulation, but the numerical grade reflects the quality and preservation of that mint state coin. The difference between MS64, MS65, MS66, and MS67 can be enormous in the marketplace. Price data illustrate this clearly. Price charting records 2026 sales of 1988p MS66 coins at $44.99, $59.99, and $73.50, depending on the individual coin and certification. These are actual sold examples, not simply prices someone hoped to receive. That's an important distinction when researching any valuable coin. The third story is the MS66 coin. This is where many collectors can get excited because the price has moved well beyond face value, but it is still important to understand what you're looking at. A certified MS66 1988p quarter is not simply an old quarter with a shiny appearance. It has been evaluated against professional grading standards. One documented PCGS MS66 example sold for $45 at David Lawrence in 2010, while another recorded PCGS MS66 sale reached $29 in an earlier auction. PCGS lists a population of 120 at MS66, with 9 higher in the referenced record, showing that MS66 is collectible, but not the absolute top of the condition scale. More recent 2026 sales provide stronger current context, with MS66 examples reported at $44.99, $59.99, and $73.50. This is why condition matters so much. The same date and mint mark can be worth dramatically different amounts depending on how well the individual coin survived. But now we reach the grade that makes the 1988p particularly fascinating, MS67. At this level, the coin needs to be exceptionally well preserved. Small marks that would be acceptable at lower grades can become important when you're trying to reach the very highest level. The fields need to be attractive, the surfaces need to be remarkably clean, the luster needs to be appealing, and the overall coin needs to meet the requirements for an elite grade. PCGS's auction database reports a 1988p MS67 auction record of $750 from an NGC MS67 example sold in November 2021. Another heritage auction record shows an NGC MS67 example selling for $444 in June 2020, while another MS67 NGC example sold for $517 in 2014. These results demonstrate something very important. Once a common date reaches an exceptionally high grade, the market can become completely different from the market for ordinary circulated examples. But remember, these prices belong to specific certified coins. They are not a guarantee that every attractive 1988p quarter is worth hundreds of dollars. Then we come to an especially dramatic auction result. Great Collections reports that it has sold 1988p Washington quarters over the years for prices ranging from $6 to $3,490 across grades from 1 through 67. Its archive specifically identifies a PCGS MS67 1988p Washington quarter with tunning that sold for $2,925. This is the kind of result that can make headlines, but it needs context. A $2.925 auction result does not mean that the average 1988p quarter is worth $2,925. It means that a particular coin, in a particular certified grade, with its particular appearance and auction circumstances, attracted that amount from buyers. That's why experienced collectors always separate the ordinary coin from the condition rarity. The enormous original mintage tells us the date itself is common. The extraordinary auction result tells us that the very best surviving examples can be much harder to obtain. This is also why a good or excellent condition coin should not automatically be called rare. If your 1988 P quarter looks nice to the naked eye, that's a good reason to inspect it more carefully, but nice is not the same as MS66 or MS67. A coin can have brilliant-looking surfaces and still contain enough contact marks, hairlines, weak strike characteristics, or other issues to fall into a lower grade. Conversely, a coin that doesn't look spectacular under normal room lighting might reveal strong original luster and surprisingly clean surfaces under proper examination. This is one reason professional grading exists. The market needs a consistent way to communicate condition. And because the price difference can become large at the upper end, collectors often pay close attention to certified populations and completed auction results rather than relying on guesses. Let's talk specifically about the P mint mark. Some viewers may see the P and immediately assume it means rare Philadelphia coin. It doesn't. The P tells us where the coin was made, but the mint mark itself does not make the 1988 P rare. Philadelphia produced more than 562 million examples of this issue. The important question is what happened to those coins after production. Millions circulated, millions received marks, and millions were stored in ways that affected their surfaces. Only a smaller portion remained in exceptional condition. That is the foundation of the 1988 P's condition rarity story. A common coin can become scarce at the very top of the grading scale. This concept appears throughout numismatics, and the 1988 P Washington quarter is a good example of why collectors look beyond mintage figures. Now let's compare three different coins. Coin number 1 is circulated and scratched. Its likely value is modest, potentially around face value or small premium depending on appearance and buyer interest. Coin number 2 is an attractive uncirculated example with good surfaces. It may sell for a few dollars if uncertified, as shown by 2026 BU sales around $2 to $3 and an especially nice BU example at $8.98. Coin number 3 is a professionally certified MS66 or MS67 example. Now we're talking about a different market. Documented MS66 sales have reached roughly $45 to $73.50 in recent examples, while MS67 auction records have reached hundreds, and in one exceptional great collections result, $2,925. Same date, same P mint mark, same basic design. Completely different market story. That is the central lesson viewers should remember. There's another important rule for anyone researching valuable coins. Always focus on sold prices rather than asking prices. An online seller can put a $500 or $5,000 price tag on a 1988 P quarter, but that doesn't prove anyone will actually pay it. Completed sales provide much stronger evidence. That's why the documented auction history is so useful. We can see examples at MS66, MS67, and other grades and understand how buyers have actually behaved. PCGS reports the $750 MS67 auction record, while Great Collections reports its much higher $2,925 result for an exceptional PCGS MS67 example. The difference between those two results also proves that there isn't one fixed price for every MS67. Eye appeal, tunning, certification, auction venue, timing, and competition can all affect the final result. A historical record is evidence, not a promise. So what should you do if you find a 1988 P Washington quarter today? First, confirm the date and mint mark. Second, examine the coin without cleaning it. Third, determine whether it has circulation wear or appears genuinely uncirculated. Fourth, inspect the surfaces for contact marks, scratches, spots, and other distractions. Fifth, compare the coin with certified examples rather than relying on random online listings. If your quarter is heavily circulated, don't expect an MS-level value. If it is genuinely pristine looking, then the possibility of a higher grade becomes more interesting. And if you believe the coin could compete at an elite grade, professional evaluation may be worth considering. The key is to let the evidence guide the value rather than letting the biggest auction number become the starting assumption. The 1988 P. Washington Quarter teaches one of the most important lessons in modern coin collecting. Rarity can exist inside a common date. More than 500 million 1988 P quarters were produced, so the date and P mint mark alone don't make the coin rare. But the highest grade survivors are a different story. PCGS's records show MS-67 examples at the top of the condition census, and auction records demonstrate that collectors have paid substantial premiums for those exceptional pieces. That's why the coin in your hand should be judged individually. A scratched circulated quarter may be an interesting piece of history, but not a major rarity. An attractive uncirculated coin might bring a modest premium. A certified MS-66 can reach tens of dollars. And an extraordinary MS-67 can enter a completely different level of the market. So before you spend that 1988 P. Washington quarter, take a second look. Don't assume that every old quarter is valuable, but don't dismiss a truly exceptional example either. Check the P mint mark, inspect the surfaces, look for circulation wear, and most importantly, compare your coin with real sold examples. In the 2026 market, documented evidence shows ordinary 1988 P quarters selling for modest amounts, certified MS-66 pieces reaching roughly $45 to $73.50 in recent sales, and elite MS-67 examples achieving several $100 or, in one exceptional great collection sale, $2,925. The real secret is not simply the year 1988. It is the combination of date, mint mark, preservation, grade, eye appeal, and proven buyer demand. One 1988 P quarter can be ordinary, another can be collectible, and an extraordinary third example can become a serious auction coin. That's what makes coin collecting so fascinating, and that's why every coin deserves its own story. Coin number 4. What if a 1983 Washington quarter sitting in an old collection, coin jar, or pocket change looks ordinary at first, but its condition tells a completely different story? Today we are taking a close look at the 1983 P. Washington quarter, the quarter with the familiar Washington portrait on the obverse, the eagle on the reverse, and the small P mint mark identifying Philadelphia. This is one of those coins where the date alone does not tell the whole story. A scratched, circulated 1983 P quarter is generally not a major rarity, but an exceptionally preserved example can enter a completely different collector market. In fact, PCGS auction records show that the 1983 P has produced some surprisingly strong prices at very high grades. One PCGS MS-67 example sold for $504 in April 2023, while another PCGS MS-67 example sold for $2,538 at great collections. So what makes these coins different? Why can one 1983 P quarter be worth little more than face value, while another can bring hundreds or even thousands of dollars? The answer is condition, grade, surface quality, and scarcity at the highest grades. And that's exactly what we're going to explore in this video. First, let's identify the coin correctly. The 1983 P. Washington quarter is a regular strike-clad Washington quarter produced at the Philadelphia Mint. The P mint mark is an important identification feature, but it does not automatically make the coin rare. The coin belongs to the modern clad era rather than the classic 90% silver era. That means you should not assume that an old-looking 1983 quarter has significant silver value. Its collector value comes from the individual coin rather than precious metal content. The important features to examine are the 1983 date, the P mint mark, the overall condition, the amount of wear, the quality of the surfaces, and whether there are any genuine mint-made varieties or errors. This is where many coin value stories go wrong. A quarter can look old, unusual, or scratched without actually being rare. A post-mint scratch is usually damage, not an error. Therefore, if your 1983 P has scratches from circulation, don't automatically connect those marks to the highest auction prices. The valuable coins discussed in auction records are specific certified examples, and their value cannot simply be transferred to every quarter with the same date and mint mark. Now let's imagine the first 1983p quarter. It has been circulating for decades. Maybe it passed through hundreds of transactions, sat inside a cash register, traveled through vending machines, or spent years in a household coin jar. Its surfaces show scratches and contact marks. Washington's portrait has visible wear, and the reverse eagle no longer has the sharp appearance of a freshly struck coin. This is the normal story for a circulated quarter. The scratches might make the coin interesting to look at, but they usually don't make it valuable. In fact, collectors generally prefer original, undamaged surfaces. If you find one of these coins, the best thing you can do is leave it alone. Don't polish it, don't try to remove the scratches, and don't use chemicals to make it shine. Altering the surface can reduce its collector appeal. Instead, examine it carefully and realistically. A circulated 1983p should not be valued by comparing it with an MS-67 auction record. Those are completely different market categories. The dramatic prices belong to exceptional examples, not ordinary scratched coins. Now consider a second 1983p quarter. This one has a completely different history. Instead of spending decades in circulation, perhaps it was placed into a collection soon after it was made. The coin still has strong, original-looking luster. Washington's portrait is sharply defined, the reverse eagle has strong details, and the fields have relatively few marks. At this point, the word condition becomes extremely important. Professional grading services use numerical grades to communicate the preservation of a coin, and the difference between one grade and another can make a huge difference in value. The current PCGS price guide gives the 1983p a range of approximately $28 to $32 at MS64, $46 to $85 at MS65, $100 to $285 at MS66, and $650 to $4,500 at MS67, depending on the guide values shown for those grades. These are guide figures, not guaranteed sale prices, so they should never be presented as automatic values for every coin. Actual auction results can be higher or lower, but they demonstrate exactly why the condition of this particular quarter matters so much. The MS65 story is especially useful because it shows how a common-looking coin can become collectible without necessarily reaching the extreme top grade. PCGS's auction database reports an extraordinary historical auction record of $15,862.50 for a 1983p Washington quarter graded NGC MS65, sold by Heritage Auctions in January 2014. That number is far above what someone might expect from a 25-cent coin. However, it should be treated carefully. It is a historical auction record for a particular certified coin and does not mean that every MS65 1983p quarter is worth $15,862.50 today. Auction records can be affected by certification, appeal, special characteristics, buyer competition, and the circumstances of a particular sale. This is why serious collectors look at multiple sales instead of relying on one headline number. The most responsible way to discuss value is to say that exceptional certified examples have achieved unusually strong results, while ordinary coins remain much more modestly valued. Now let's move up to MS66. This is where the difference between an attractive uncirculated coin and an exceptional coin becomes easier to understand. An MS66 example must have excellent overall preservation, with surfaces that compare favorably against other coins of the same issue. Small contact marks become increasingly important as the grade rises. A coin can be uncirculated and still not qualify for MS66. It may have too many marks, weaker eye appeal, surface problems, or other characteristics that hold it back. This is why simply looking at a coin and saying, "It looks shiny, so it must be MS67, is not reliable. Professional grading involves careful evaluation. For the 1983p, PCGS currently shows MS66 guide values ranging from $100 to $285. Again, those numbers are guide information rather than a guaranteed price. The important lesson is that the market begins to separate ordinary uncirculated coins from truly high-grade survivors. Then we arrive at MS-67, where the 1983 P Washington quarter becomes particularly fascinating. PCGS's records show 27 examples at MS-67, with 4 graded higher in the referenced population information. That tells us something important. The coin is not rare because only a few 1983 P quarters were originally made. Instead, it can become scarce at the very highest grades because only a limited number of surviving examples meet those demanding standards. One PCGS MS-67 quarter sold for $504 at Stack's Bowers in April 2023. Another PCGS MS-67 example sold for $2,538 at Great Collections in August 2013. A separate 2014 Heritage sale recorded $1,410 for an MS-67 example, and a 2025 Stack's Bowers auction recorded an NGC MS-67 at $240. Look at the range: $240, $504, $1,410, and $2,538. These are not contradictions. They show that auction prices can vary substantially even for coins carrying the same date and grade. That variation is one of the most important lessons in the entire 1983 P story. There is no single magic number that applies to every high-grade coin. The final selling price can depend on the grading company, the individual coin's eye appeal, surface quality, tunning, strike, auction venue, timing, and how strongly buyers compete for it. That's why one MS-67 can sell for a few $100s, while another can bring well over $1,000. A headline saying 1983 quarter sold for thousands is technically describing a real event if it refers to a documented auction, but it can become misleading if viewers are left believing that every 1983 P quarter is worth thousands. The actual story is much more interesting. The 1983 P is a common date quarter whose finest surviving examples can be conditionally scarce and therefore highly desirable. Now let's return to the scratched coin, because this is where many viewers may find themselves. Suppose your quarter has a noticeable scratch across Washington's face or a deep line across the reverse. Should you assume the scratch is valuable? Usually no. Most scratches acquired after minting are simply damage. A genuine mint error is created during the manufacturing process, and distinguishing a true error from damage can require expert examination. A scratch that happened when the coin was in circulation does not become valuable merely because it looks dramatic under a camera. In fact, scratches can make a coin less desirable. This is why you should not clean or polish the quarter in an attempt to improve its appearance. If you think the coin has something unusual, preserve it exactly as you found it and compare it with reliable numismatic information. The most valuable 1983 P examples discussed here are valuable because of exceptional preservation and certified grade, not because someone scratched them after they left the mint. The next story is the excellent condition 1983 P quarter. Imagine you find one that looks bright, has strong luster, and has very little visible wear. This is where it makes sense to slow down. Look closely at the fields around Washington. Examine the cheek and hair details. Turn the coin over and inspect the eagle and surrounding fields. Look for contact marks and signs of circulation. Don't use a magnifying glass to convince yourself that every tiny mark is an error. Instead, think like a collector. How well preserved is the entire coin? Does it look original? Are there distracting marks? Is the luster intact? Is the strike strong? Does the coin have eye appeal? These questions matter because high-grade modern clad quarters can be surprisingly difficult to find without the marks that accumulated during production, transportation, storage, and circulation. A coin that looks ordinary from across the room can become very interesting when examined carefully. And this is where the phrase condition rarity becomes essential. Imagine that millions of 1983 P quarters were originally produced. Most were eventually circulated. Some were saved. Some were damaged. Some were stored in collections, but only a much smaller number may survive in the condition necessary to reach the highest grades. The market can therefore create a strange situation. The coin is common overall, but rare in a particular condition. That's exactly why the PCGS population information for MS-67 matters. The existence of only a small number of coins at the highest grade tells collectors that finding another comparable example can be difficult. This is also why an ordinary scratched quarter and an MS-67 quarter should never be treated as the same collectible simply because both say 1983p. Another important point is the difference between a listing price and a sold price. Anyone can list a 1983p quarter for $500, $1,000, or $10,000. That doesn't prove a buyer actually paid that amount. For a serious value estimate, completed sales are much stronger evidence. The documented PCGS auction records give us several useful reference points. $504 for a PCGS MS-67 in April 2023, $2,538 for another PCGS MS-67 at Great Collections, $1,410 for an MS-67 in a heritage auction, and $240 for an NGC MS-67 in June 2025. These results show why it is better to say documented sales have reached these amounts, rather than making a promise that your coin will sell for one particular number. The market decides the final price when the actual coin is offered. So if you have a 1983p Washington quarter today, what should you look for? Start with the basics. Confirm the date is 1983. Confirm the P mint mark. Check whether the coin has circulation wear. Look for scratches, dents, discoloration, and other damage. If the coin is heavily worn, it is unlikely to compete with the high-grade auction examples. If it appears uncirculated and unusually clean, then it becomes more interesting. If it seems exceptional, professional grading can provide a standardized assessment, but don't assume that grading automatically creates value. The grade must be high enough, and the market must have demand for that particular issue. The documented auction results show that the strongest 1983p prices are concentrated among exceptional certified examples. The 1983p Washington quarter is therefore a perfect example of why coin collecting is about much more than age. A 1983 coin is more than 4 decades old, but age alone doesn't make it rare. A quarter with scratches may have an interesting history, but usually won't command a major premium. An attractive uncirculated coin can be worth more, while an elite MS-67 example can enter a completely different collector market. PCGS currently lists guide values that rise sharply as the grade moves from MS-64 toward MS-67, and its auction archive contains multiple high-grade sales demonstrating that real buyers have paid substantial premiums for exceptional examples. And that's the final lesson. Every 1983p quarter has its own story. One coin may have spent decades in circulation and carry scratches from its journey. Another may have been protected in a collection for years. Another may have survived with extraordinary surfaces and eventually received an MS-67 grade. The date and P mint mark may be identical, but the market story can be completely different. The documented auction evidence proves that the very best examples can be valuable. But it also proves that you shouldn't take a record price and apply it to every quarter. In 2026, the smart approach is to examine the individual coin, compare its condition with certified examples, and rely on actual sold prices rather than exaggerated asking prices. So before you spend or discard a 1983p Washington quarter, take a careful look. If yours is scratched and circulated, keep your expectations realistic. If it is in genuinely excellent condition with strong original surfaces and very few marks, then it may deserve closer attention. And if it appears extraordinary, remember that the biggest numbers belong to exceptionally graded coins. The documented market has seen 1983p MS-67 examples sell for $240, $504, $1,410, and even $2,538 in different auctions, while PCGS records an extraordinary historical MS-65 result of $15,862.50. Those figures are fascinating, but they are not guarantees. Your coin's actual value depends on its own grade, preservation, certification, eye appeal, and what buyers are willing to pay. That's what makes the 1983p Washington quarter such an interesting coin to study. The same date and mint mark can represent an ordinary piece of pocket change, or in an exceptionally preserved and documented example, a serious numismatic collectible.